Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. This is your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Thanks for turning this passion project into one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you like what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means the world to us. Now, the best entrepreneurs are agitators and often polymaths. That is, they're curious and know a lot about a lot of things. Often, great startup CEOs are also, say, endurance athletes or chefs or adrenaline junkies. Sometimes great engineers are also musicians or painters or writers. Well, today's guest is a CEO, a podcast host, bless his soul, a musician, and also a software developer. Jeff Meyerson's a trained engineer, but also a serial entrepreneur and the author of the acclaimed book, Move Fast, How Facebook Builds Software. Jeff spent 2 years researching Facebook's Move Fast culture and came away with, well, you'll see, some strong opinions about the vice grip Facebook has on modern apps, and equally important, how we can all learn to build better software. Today, we get an opportunity to learn not just about the future of software development, but also how to exploit an opportunity and turn a question, a passion, into a hypothesis, a research project, and maybe even a brand. When Jeff isn't launching his startup Rectangle or on book tours, he's hosting his podcast, Software Daily, or sometimes needling big tech with acerbic Facebook tweets. If you're not already, I encourage you to follow Jeff at _Prion, Prion on Twitter. And of course, buy his book, Move Fast, How Facebook Builds Software. It's on Amazon or wherever you buy books. We will link to both in the show notes. And without further ado, Jeff, my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Why don't you, let's get started by share a little bit about your background and how you got into the space.
That's a very generous intro, and I appreciate you having done a lot of research in preparation for the show, clearly. My background is rooted in collectible card games. I grew up playing Pokemon and then Magic the Gathering, and then I started playing poker. Poker taught me a lot, and then I lost a lot of money, and I moved into computer science, and from there I went into entrepreneurship, and that kind of brings us to today.
Single most important you've learned as a repeat entrepreneur?
Don't ever give up. What's your answer to that question?
Savor the days when you feel 2 inches tall, because that's when you learn the most.
Ooh, good one.
Being a serial entrepreneur, it's such an amazingly humbling experience. You get to meet amazing people, and oftentimes I think we overestimate the role that we play in our success and underestimate the role that others play. So one thing I've learned is always to appreciate that there's a healthy component of luck. And like I said, savor the times when you feel like you've been crushed, and realize those are the opportunities that you have to build back.
So when was the last time you were 2 inches tall?
Are we talking on the scale of hours or days, or because oftentimes, certainly what I do is primarily selling our AI first platform to enterprise customers. You're constantly told no, or we're not ready, or this or that. And part of what's amazing about the entrepreneurial journey is being able to, realize that every time the prospect or the customer, typically the prospect says no, that's when the selling begins. That's when the education begins. So taking those no's as, opportunities to get a little better, I think is, a recurring theme, a daily theme for me.
I've been surprised about how much I've enjoyed sales, particularly selling podcast ads, which there is no map for. I'm sure you've done a fair bit of sales in your life.
What have you learned about sales, or about yourself through sales, I should say?
In poker, you have a play style, and in sales, you also have a play style. Every word you say, every verbal tick you make, every facial tick you make, your physical appearance, all these different things impact your expected value in various ways. And in poker, it's a limited dimensionality, but in sales, it's an unlimited dimensionality. So I would say I like podcast ad sales more than poker.
Have you made more money selling podcast ads?
Definitely.
So
For now.
I mentioned in the intro, you're a polymath, a musician, and a developer, an entrepreneur, etc. A lot of people would think that being a musician and being a developer, kind of the unstructured or the right brain versus the left brain, are polar opposites, but seems to have worked well for you and a lot of other people. How do you kind of reconcile those different parts of who you are?
I just want to water down that word polymath a little bit because growing up, I was actually good at nothing. I was bad at sports, bad at school. The first year of college, I went to University of Texas at San Antonio, which is a great school. But I went there not because it was my first choice, but because it was the only school I could get into that could plausibly transfer to University of Texas at Austin. So I don't know. So I guess the root of your question was what exactly?
You're both a musician and a developer, an entrepreneur. Are those polar opposites, or does one feed the other? How do you manage to reconcile those seemingly different parts of who you are?
For me, they're really about hedges because, as you said, the world is built to reduce you to 2 inches tall or less on many occasions. And we're lucky to live in a time where you have this computer thing, which is not just a bicycle for the mind, but it's a jetpack for the mind. It's a therapist for the mind. It's everything you could ever want in a single device. And, in those times when you get reduced to 2 inches tall, or you run out of money or whatever, it's nice to have other things you can do. So, for example, when I ran out of money after my first business or my second business, Adverprise, I spent all my money. I bootstrapped the entire business. I ran down to $0 due to, oh, by the way, this is actually the number one lesson learned about entrepreneurship. Never do paid acquisition, especially if it's a negative income stream paid acquisition. Don't ever do that. But after I lost all my money, I wrote my best album, which is Gig Economy, and it was the time of my life. So I just you know I just feel like we have so much opportunity, we have so much wealth. Basically, we have so much baseline wealth that like what most people consider wealth is kind of what in poker they would call free rolling. You just got a bunch of money that you can lose or you can lose or you can magnify. It doesn't really matter because your baseline is so much higher than what anybody else in history has experienced.
Is music therapy for you?
It's invigorating. It's the most invigorating thing for me. So when I was in school, I was studying computer science and I was just applying all my computer science principles to writing music, and nobody understood. Nobody heard the music I played, I made. I would post it. I did as much social media as I knew how to do back then. Nobody listened to it, and because I was spending all my time writing music, I was suffering in my grades. But it was all I really wanted to do. I knew from, very early on in my computer science classes that really the only programming that I was going to be doing in my life was writing music. So it's just kind of I mean, so nobody has really applied software engineering principles to writing music at an industrial scale. That's something that I'm going to be doing at some point in my career. And a lot of this, what I'm doing today, is merely just like poking and prodding the nascent developer tools for writing music and trying to learn how to industrialize it.
Now, before we started to record, we were sharing our perspectives on the stranglehold that the big five have on our data and what are some of the implications of that. And specifically, you're an expert on Facebook and some of the practices that they've used to get where they are. I'd be remiss if even right at the top of the show, I didn't ask you for your perspectives from having written the book, and maybe Maybe I'll throw a softball at you for starters. How do you feel about the React.js?
React.js is as important as Linux. And you have been around since at least the 90s doing work in software and engineering. Um, you know how important Linux is. It basically is the backbone of the internet, but it's terrifically mission critical security software. And React is the Linux of the front end. So basically, this thing mediates everything that you see and do on the internet, from native mobile applications to random Electron apps to JavaScript to really everything that you see. And if it doesn't directly mediate everything you see, then it can be used to paint over everything you see. It can be used to inject into your experience everything that Mark Zuckerberg could ever want you to see. That's chilling to me. When I started to realize this, it made me very nervous because I kind of don't know how to break it to the world. I'm not a polemicist. I'm really not. I mean, I know how to do polemic. I've done it a little bit, but this is not a polemic argument. This is an engineering argument, and we're actually actively working right now. There's a security researcher, a technical writer on our team who's looking into this at a serious level. We're going to try to figure out how to publish a paper on this. This is something we just stumbled onto. But yeah, React basically like controls everything you see and do, and I don't even know if Facebook like realizes how important it is. They may not even realize it. They legitimately may not realize it, but I kind of think they do. This whole metaverse thing is like really scary to me. Like, I don't really want to live in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, and I already feel like I do, and I don't really like it. I don't like what Facebook does to me and my family. I just, it's the thing makes me nervous, and at the same time, it enlivens me and it connects me to all these people that I know and love. So I kind of have, it's like I have a self-hating relationship with Facebook or something. Like I love it and I hate it. It's like, Facebook is like the invention of the computer. Basically, it's like it's such an important invention. It's such an important milestone in our world. Like, someone very close to me said, Mark Zuckerberg is sort of bigger than the president of the internet. That's really an accurate description of who he is.
So in this show, we end up talking about the ethics of AI a lot and the implications of your data being used to potentially make decisions on your behalf that are harmful that you never know about, and you're not privy to how the decisions were made. So contrast that with what you said, which I agree with. Let's say React is the Linux of the front end of the web. I think that's actually a nice description. That's a conversation we haven't had on this show. Let's say, take a doomsday scenario when Facebook controls the front end of your web experience. Talk about some of the potential dangers of that.
Let's say that you happen to have installed a Chrome browser extension. Let's say you installed an ad blocker, and Facebook happens to own that ad blocker through a shell company. And you navigate to Google and you do a search for, images of a cat. And as you're doing that, through the browser extension, Facebook decides to modify the search results. I want to know if that's possible. I guess I can't say definitively if that's possible. I haven't run the test myself. That's certainly a test we'd like to run, but to me it seems possible.
We've all heard about ways that they could potentially manipulate what's in your news feed to control your, obviously, everything from political affiliation to alter your sentiment, things like that, certainly, we've seen it be weaponized, the feed. But the feed is different from, the finger quotes open source framework that is React. If you had kind of the bully pulpit and you could educate the world's software developers about the drawbacks of using a super popular, open source framework like React, what would you tell them to be aware of?
Well, React is amazing, and it's hard to imagine a future without React. Um, you know, I kind of want to see Facebook pivot into an infrastructure company because that would allow them to pursue their rapacious business intent with a modality that's not going to like have a side effect of destroying humanity. So what would I recommend to actual developers using React? I mean, use it. It's awesome. It's fantastic. But like, I don't know, maybe if you're curious, look into it for security vulnerabilities because we need a lot more eyes on this thing.
I'll be eager to see what you and your team publish.
Yeah. I'll be working closely with our technical writer.
So in the course of the 2.5 years that you did your research for the book, you obviously learned a lot about how Facebook builds software. How does Facebook build software? It's an amazing organization, and you're talking to a lot of product managers right now and developers who are rightfully enamored with the software company that is Facebook.
Speed above all is kind of how Facebook builds software, and that's kind of how I operate as well. So I'm deeply sympathetic to the company. In fact, I consider the company kind of a muse to me, and I'm not even like trying to BS anybody here. Like I'm genuinely inspired by the company. I didn't set out to write some like takedown or something of the company. If you read the book, it's incredibly laudatory. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and which makes it, by the way, all the more frustrating that all the Facebook engineers that I'm trying to reach out to about this vulnerability don't really take me seriously. But the company is just inspirational because they figured out that actually you can build software way, way, way faster than Google was doing it or anybody else was doing it. Like testing is actually less important. It's genuinely less important. And then, but really what we're going to learn here, after we see how hard this is going to be to clean up. This is going to be harder to clean up than the Exxon Valdez. Like this is just such a huge mess. And we're gonna really, really, really figure out the consequences of kind of moving fast with tyrannical intent, which is sort of how Facebook has truly operated. And you know how a company, what a company actually believes by their actions, right? You know it through their actions. They can say whatever they want. They can say whatever platitudes they want. It actually doesn't matter. What matters is their actions. And from Google to Facebook to Amazon to whatever, like all these companies have shown through their actions, at various times that, well, they're actually human, right? I'm competitive, you're competitive, we're all in it to win, right? And that's fine. But let's just be honest about what we're doing. Let's not like do this virtuous gamesmanship. Like we don't really need that. Can we just talk honestly about what we're doing? We're competing. This is a sports game. My thesis with Software Daily was largely to be the ESPN for software because this is a highly competitive sport.
Point out in the book that maybe even since you were doing your research, the thesis around Facebook has changed to move fast and break things to something akin to move fast and focus on infrastructure stability, or something that's not nearly as catchy. But are they trying to reshape the culture there?
Well, yeah. So there was the initial phrase was move fast and break things, and then the second phrase was move fast with stable infrastructure. This was an evolution, and that was representative of the fact that Facebook became communications infrastructure. If Facebook would have stayed a photo sharing company or become, let's say, a gaming company, or even like maybe a cloud services provider, it would be okay to still break things. but they became communications infrastructure. They became the way that you communicate with your grandma. And in doing so, they became like a telephone company. So, it's you just have to change some things, and it doesn't seem like they changed enough, sadly. But they did change a lot. I mean, Facebook is reliable; it's very stable in the sense that like Messenger never seems to go down. WhatsApp never seems to go down. It just seems like very stable infrastructure. So they are accomplishing that to some extent.
If you're starting a new company and building a new app today, and here we are recording in August 2021, you're as much of an expert on the stuff where on the modern software stack as anyone. Talk us through, what are the tools of your trade?
Well, I am very, very interested in a variety of development modalities. The thing that's probably interesting me the most right now is Airtable, I would say, because Airtable is essentially a full-on developer platform that is basically what you would want out of a modern Microsoft Windows. Um, my struggle with it is that it's all closed source and they have tremendous pricing power, and I don't really like the idea of just like surgically wedding myself to Airtable in order to build a business. I just don't like that style of doing business, and I think Airtable is doing it. Speaking of rapaciously, they're doing it rapaciously, and I love Howie Liu, the CEO. He's incredibly talented and smart and nice, but I don't really imagine him building any way for me to like modularize my Airtable blocks or get my data out of there. Like it's just not going to happen. So I struggle with that one. Modern data engineering is really powerful. There's a lot you can do with that. Low code is really cool. Like Airtable is basically low code. Notion is fascinating. So I'm kind of interested in these new semi-artistic platforms. Like Notion is kind of a semi-artistic company. It's Notion resists analogy. What's the close? Have you used Notion much?
Yeah, and I didn't think you were going to go there with both Airtable or Notion, but yes, I have used it, and I'm a big advocate for low or no code platforms. I spent 4 years at ServiceNow, which was an early PaaS provider, so platform as a service. So yeah, curious to get your full thoughts on that. So Notion, I wouldn't think of as the backbone of a new app. I think of it more as kind of, for lack of a better term, the citizen analyst or the citizen, the citizen developer, but not for kind of building a commercial grade app around. Am I wrong there?
Well, so I could give lower level answers. Like I could say I'm really excited about Supabase, the open source Firebase, or Firebase itself, which we use in most of our applications, or render.com, which I'm an investor in, which is kind of the next generation of Heroku style infrastructure. But I feel like these Notion style companies are kind of like Apple, or if you look at like Webflow or Bubble, these things that empower anybody. They don't just empower developers, they don't just empower non-developers, they empower both. And they allow developers to collaborate with non-developers in very productive ways. And what I think this does is it really flattens how we see each other. Because so one of the things that we do in our companies is we don't have hierarchy. We simply do not have hierarchy. And that's not to say we're doing the Zappos thing. What was it? Holacracy. We're not doing that. But like I experienced hierarchy at Amazon and it kind of made me sick every day. I experienced hierarchy at all my previous jobs. And I just kind of always have wanted to return to the days of poker where everybody I hang out with is kind of like an equal. And I guess we're stack ranked based on how much money we've made. But even then, it's like not really a stack rank. It's just like a financial stack rank. It's not a personality stack rank. It's not a I mean, so much of this world is just luck. Like who you are in this world is just luck. And that's really unfair. So I don't like this idea that we're basically like stack ranked within an organization based on how lucky we got.
So if I'm long on the future of AI and the future of technology, which caveat, I am, I'm looking at AI and all of the ways that it can democratize access to technology around the world. It can accelerate dramatically, the learning curve. OpenAI famously recently introduced Copilot, which is kind of in theory, a pair programmer for anyone living in GitHub. There's also controversy surrounding that, and anyone who's familiar with Copilot knows it's actually much less than what it was billed to be. But question for you, as a technologist, what do you think the role is of technology making it easier to develop technology? And perhaps this is science fiction today, but will there be a time in the future when apps will write themselves with people building on top of AI first development platforms?
The answer is yes. The way that we get there is an aggregation of tools. It's not any one tool. It's not any specific AI algorithm. It's just going to be a collection of abstractions working together. I think Copilot seemed pretty intuitive to me. It's like, I just look at Copilot, I think of the Google Smart Compose thing where you can tab complete into, sentences that are based on your previous responses as well as other people's responses that are similar to yours. So, that'll get better over time in a variety of vectors. And I think that I'm just going to connect this back to open source, because we really need to have open source as a default. We actually don't only need open source. We need open source, open data, open operations, open algorithms, something like open data. But open data is tough because you have to anonymize it. So, but we have to basically create a fully introspectable world, because otherwise somebody's going to sneak out something on us and screw over everybody, and that's just going to happen eventually. And we really don't want that, right? We really don't want anybody making this big power grab and turning the world into a big concentration camp or something. Like, we just don't want that, and that can easily happen with today's technology. It's kind of chilling. I don't know if you agree. You agree with that?
Certainly. I mean, I'm not a believer in the coming bot apocalypse. My company is very intentionally called People Reign, because I firmly believe that while technology is amazing, people do and always will reign. And I think it will always be the case that people control the technology doesn't control people. And it's incumbent on us to exercise responsible use of technology. That's a lot of what we discuss on this podcast. Now, if we talk about a time, even if it's in the mid to long-term future, where AI can do something as sophisticated as write software for us, what is your coaching for, let's say, my kids are 11 and 13, and they're just at the cusp of starting to be passionate about something that they're going to do for perhaps a lifetime. What are the skills that they should be learning that will never be good candidates for automation?
The company I just started called Supercompute is addressing this. We've raised a decent amount of capital, and you can see the game that we're making at supercompute.games. Probably by the time this airs, the game will actually be playable and pretty good. But maybe not. We got a little bit of work to do, but it's not that hard to build a game, at least from an engineering standpoint. But really what this game teaches you to do is to build software and to build software businesses. And also it has an optimistic bent to it. So it takes seriously the idea that anyone can be entrepreneurial, either on them by themselves or on a team. And it's positive sum. It's about accumulation. It's about competition. It lauds competition, but it also is lighthearted, because we need humor. We really need humor to remind ourselves of our humanity. And because you can't have humor with one person, right? I mean, you can have, like, I don't know how many times you've laughed at what an AI has done, but for me, it's like not many times. AI is generally not that funny. There's been a few AI things that are kind of funny, They're usually just funny because of how poorly the AI does at assessing a situation in a humorous manner, but sometimes it's really good. So, but I feel like you have AI humor, then you have human humor, and they're just very different things. I've never really had an AI that's like told me a really, really good joke or like, kind of like hugged me and made me feel warm. Like I just think it's going to be a really long time if ever we get that. And basically like the AI would need to be, you know, on par with a human such that we wouldn't even, it would have to be like that Haley Joe Osment movie. I think it was called AI, where really the AI is essentially indistinguishable from a human. And at that point, that'll be fine. Like that's what we should be building is basically we should try to have an AI that just is like a human. And if we have something that's just like worse than a human in some definitive way, that's kind of dangerous. If it's better than a human, that's kind of dangerous. So we really want to like train this stuff on who humans are, unless we want to get replaced or move towards some kind of like dangerous implantation kind of modality with the Neuralink kind of stuff. I'm not a big fan of that. Yeah, so I think we need to teach like different kinds of ethics and different kinds of strategy. And I think games are a really good place to start, and business as soon as they're ready. Business, and you could say coding. I don't really think like engineering and coding is really something you have to do. It's just I'm not even a good engineer. I'm not a very good programmer, except for music. I think I'm decent at music. So I don't know. Just have them messing around on a computer all day. It should be pretty good.
Learning logic, I think, is a skill that is transcendent, whether you apply it to coding, technology, or anything else. I think that's
Like
certainly a
like
skill.
formal logic or like high level
Informal logic.
philosophy.
Now I was thinking
Okay.
more of like coding logic,
Okay.
uh, loops and sequences, and just learning even the fundamentals of programming. I think transcend any field. Even a time when AI is augmenting programmers, I think there'll always be a need to understand those logical flows. And by the way, I think game development is extremely hard. You deserve more credit.
I don't know. Have you done game development or?
Back in college, it's been a long time.
But I mean, it's not it's so much safer than so. Like the thing about like I like about game development is you can pretty much move fast and break things for a much longer period of time, right? So you really can build a culture without testing. You can just go super aggro, and that I really like. Like what you're doing with People Rain, you're building fairly critical infrastructure, and that brings with it probably higher margins and like a better business, at least in a vacuum. But I'm just kind of a reckless individual, so the idea of building a gaming company resonates with my id a little bit more.
So I got to get you off the hot seat, but not without at least one last question. So I saw a tweet from you that I thought was interesting and just super humble. And as I get to know you, I see it's totally genuine. You're a technical co-founder. You started, I think in this case, it was Rectangle, not Supercompute. But and you said, kind of, this is who I am. I'm looking for, some partners to help me grow this thing. That was a level of humility that you rarely see, certainly in Silicon Valley. So I want to know what were you put on this earth to do? Like when you've done your job, your work's done here, and you look back and you say, yeah, breathe a little bit, pat yourself on the back. Like, what is it that you have accomplished? Because clearly it's not having to be the CEO or having some moniker on a business card. Like, what is it that will be your enduring contribution?
I think reducing luck is pretty important to me. I honestly just don't like the amount of luck that exists in the world. I have a number of friends who are in fairly low places, and it really breaks my heart. And I've been in some tough spots myself. It's a pretty harsh world, and it kind of doesn't need to be, right? I don't really know why we're talking about like the metaverse and stuff. Like, can we just like figure out how to get some basic amount of money and internet to people and like give them clean water and stuff? Like, is that really hard? It seems like that stuff should be pretty easy to do. If you're like Mark Zuckerberg, like, why aren't you just like taking all your, ill-gotten gains and just like helping the world in a genuine manner rather than just like, I don't know. It's maybe he just really doesn't know how to help people in the right manner, or just like he sucks at go to market for helping people. I've been taken advantage of at various points in my life because I put too much trust in various power structures. So from my point of view, there's just kind of a fundamental issue with power structures. If you assemble a lot of power in one place, that power is going to be abused. Like, how many generations is through history is it going to take to realize that that probably means that power structures are messed up? And we've got lots of interesting ideas about how to reduce concentration of power. And I'm kind of trying to exemplify that in a certain manner because like I said, I don't really want to run any of these companies. I've got some good ideas. I'm kind of an erratic individual. You don't really want to be like, quote, managed by me. Just ask any of the people that I work with. But I do like writing music. I'd like to write music also. I'd like to go for a run on Saturday. So maybe we can go for a run sometime since you live in the area.
I look forward to that in the Presidio, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
I love it. Mark Zuckerberg back in 2017 was an advocate for universal basic income. So I haven't heard him say much about it recently, but at least at some level, he's human, even though I think he sometimes lacks bedside manner.
I hesitate to say anything bad about the guy without sitting down for a conversation with him. But what I will say is like one of the things that, I feel like, so when I think about who is the leader that I trust the most that I've seen in my lifetime, I mean, there's a few people that come to mind, a few people in the military, a few of my family members, like a few professors that have really, shown a lot of trust. Certainly, the guy who started software engineering radio, Robert Blumen, I'm a huge fan of his. He's a big mentor to me. But really, I feel like Obama really shows what leadership is on so many levels. But really, like, Obama's the perfect example of like, it when you see it. You look at that guy and you're just like, I kind of trust that guy. I don't know what it is about him, but he looks pretty healthy. He looks well put together. He seems to treat his family well. He seems to treat his friends well. I've never really heard anybody say a bad thing about the guy other than like highly politically motivated stuff. Obviously he's done some stuff with like drone strikes, maybe that you could argue are like kind of hostile or controversial, but like you're a president, you have to do tough stuff. And with Zuckerberg, you kind of get the opposite feeling, right? There's like something about the guy that's a little bit unnerving. And the way that he's like just like alienated person after person in his history, from the Winklevoss twins to Jan Koum to we don't really know what happened with Kevin Systrom. I don't know. It's just like the guy seems to make enemies and he seems hostile and combative, and it's frustrating to me. And I kind of want to just like sit down with the guy and be like, hey, why don't you just go build like a cloud provider and make billions of dollars? Like, do you really think Jeff Bezos can outcompete you to be a cloud? I'm sorry, not even Jeff Bezos anymore. Do you really think Andy Jassy can outcompete you in cloud? If Zuckerberg went into cloud, he would beat everybody. He'd beat everybody. Mark my words, he would beat everybody. He would probably be the richest person in the world. And also his hands would be much cleaner. I hope Zuck goes into cloud infrastructure, and I hope he makes it open source. I hope he is able to like rise to become the president. Like, clearly he wants to be president. We saw him doing the tour. We know he wants to be president. It's obvious. So like he should just be like a nicer, more honest, more transparent guy. And it's not that hard.
Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening, I'll say you're welcome on behalf of Jeff. You got a lot of good advice there.
Or like grab a green tea with me and have a conversation, because like I have a lot of issues with this company and the way it's run, and I'd be happy to be. I'd love to have my mind changed, by the way. I mean, not like the way that Facebook changes most people's minds, but like the genuine like conversational mind changing.
Hey Jeff, when you have that conversation, will you come back and tell us about it on the show?
I'd be happy to.
All right, that's great. I got to get in a plug as well. You mentioned the AI and humor. And this is a guest we haven't had, but I hope we have her on the show. Janelle Shane wrote a book called You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. And it's all of her silly experiments with neural nets and some of the bizarre, and it's laughing at AI, not with AI, but laughing at some of the silliness that comes when you feed a bunch of inputs into various neural nets. So I encourage you to check it out. It's a good book.
Sounds cool. Yeah, I mean, I love computer related humor. Like, it's my favorite form of humor. But mostly I can just find the best humor just by Googling. If you just Google images of various things, you can find pretty funny images.
Well, good stuff, Jeff. We're way over time. We went way off script, and this conversation was much more interesting as a result. So thanks for hanging out with me.
Cool. Let's go for a run.
You bet. You bet. I'm all for it. All right. As we wrap up, I'll again thank Jeff. Follow him on Twitter, as I mentioned. Is it Prion or Prion?
I've heard both articulations. In biology class, I heard Prion.
Prion. That was how I pronounced it. Yeah. So we're going to call it Prion. At the_Prion on Twitter. And of course, go buy the book. Tell Jeff you loved it.
Or listen to the free audiobook. You don't need to buy it.
You're supposed to plug the book. You're allowed to hawk copies of the book. One way or the other, it's a good listen, a good read, and I'm glad for the sake of humanity that Jeff wrote it. So again, thanks to Jeff. This is your host, Dan Turchin, signing off for another week, but back next week with another fascinating guest.
Wonderful interview. Thank you.